Hey guys, Stephanie with the Machine Gun Nest here with a new legal update. So today I want to talk about what's going on in California. Now, we all know California is off the rails in so many ways, but they just always find a way to outdo themselves. So right now, there is a bill. It's called Assembly Bill 1127. This was passed by the California State Legislature, and this is now on Governor Newsom's desk. So what is this bill? Buckle up.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
So right now in the state of California, similarly to here in Maryland, there's what's called a handgun safety roster. That's what they call it out there in California. We have a similar roster here. All this means is that it's some goofy roster that they arbitrarily say, yep, these guns are okay to sell in the state of Maryland, and these guns are not okay to sell in the state of Maryland. Now the same thing applies in California, but in California, it's even crazier. So gun companies have to modify their firearm to fit these weird stipulations to be for sale to California citizens. Now, most gun companies say, this is kind of a weird redesign. It might not be feasible to do it. It's a business. They want to look at the cost for recreating, redesigning, and producing that particular model and see if the market will even make that viable in a business sense. So often the case is no. And so there are very few handguns that are legally available to law-abiding citizens in California. But one gun company has always been readily available, and it is Glock. Glocks are so reliable. They're probably the most commonly owned handgun, not just for defense, but for your Second Amendment right. But it's a common gun for concealed carry and home defense. In fact, Kamala Harris herself bragged about having a Glock.
What kind of gun do you own, and when and why did you get it?
I have a Glock, and I've had it for quite some time.
Have you ever fired it?
Yes. Of course I have. At a shooting range. Yes, of course I have.
Now, whether she actually has one or not, I have no idea. And if she did, I don't know if she'd know how to use it. But Glocks are commonly owned in California. But here's the insidious part about AB 1127. This is all about making it illegal for a law-abiding citizen to own a firearm that could be converted into something fully automatic. Now, this is a weird, completely misguided and malicious attempt to get Glocks out of the hands of law-abiding citizens just because there are some criminals who have been illegally converting them into fully automatic pistols. Now, in an attempt to do that, they're just demolishing the rights of all of these law-abiding citizens. Just because something can be converted doesn't mean that it itself in that state is dangerous at all. In fact, any gun can be converted to full auto. They're simple machines. They're simple devices. And with the right parts, experience, and know-how, you can convert anything into full auto. Now, they didn't name Glock particularly, but this bill will make even a Glock illegal to own in the state of California. Now, rather than that part of this bill, because we don't want to play whack-a-mole, we want to be good thinkers. We want to understand the underlying philosophy behind all of these things, because when you're having a discussion, you need to be equipped on how to converse about these. And if you're just talking about, well, this bill and that bill, you're actually going to miss the forest for the trees, and that's not what we want to do. It all comes back to how do you define these terms. Now, when you're having a formal debate with somebody, the very first thing you do after you announce what the proposition is define your terms, because you can't even converse about that. You can't debate unless you are on the same page with those terms, right? A good example of this would be saying, I love Jesus, I believe in Jesus. And if somebody else says, oh, well, I love Jesus and I believe in Jesus too. if I define Jesus as God himself, but you define Jesus as maybe an ascended master or he himself a created being, we're not talking about the same guy here. So even though you could agree on these sentences, you're talking about something completely different. And the same thing applies in the firearm industry and anything else. So we want to watch out for these whitewashed euphemisms. I want to read to you some of this text so that you can see. So under section 1 in AB-1127, the very first part, the section here, they're defining their terms. So section 1, if you go to little point H, point H says reasonable controls, right? Reasonable controls. It says it means reasonable procedures, acts, or practices that are designed, implemented, and enforced to do the following. I'm going to skip down to point 4. It says prevent the installation and use of a pistol converter as defined in section 17015 of the Penal Code with a firearm. Do you see what they did here? It would be really easy to kind of read through this and, oh, blah, 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 definition of terms. But do you know what they've done? Now, if you're not familiar with this, if you're not, maybe you're a gun person, maybe you like to shoot, maybe you own some guns, but you're not familiar with these particularities, you would read that and say, oh, it's reasonable. The contrary to reasonable is what? It's unreasonable. They've already framed this to be, well, if you don't agree with this, you are unreasonable. Why do they get to say that it is reasonable to define things in this way? It's ugly and it's nefarious, and they know exactly what they're doing. They are now saying in this bill that if you have a firearm and it could potentially be converted to have some other use, that is unreasonable. Now, this is dangerous. Now, if this were a few years ago, I would say, you know what, California, you are done. I am sorry, everybody, and we are ready for the exodus into the rest of us states who would want to take you in. I don't want to say that here in Maryland. We've got enough of that California mentality here. But I do want to say this. Previously, I would think Governor Newsom would sign this without a doubt. But honestly, I'm not quite sure he will. I think inside he wants to, but I think that he's gearing up for this presidential run, and he's personally trying to rebrand as a moderate. He's kind of backpedaled and softened his approach about other issues that have proven to be losing issues, like radical trans and all of these other issues that the general public has said, you know, we're not really feeling that.
It's a no for me, dog.
So I think he's trying to gauge the temperature of the room here and realizing that, okay, maybe this isn't necessarily a winning issue. None of us are fooled. We know Governor Newsom is a total whack job. But overall, I'm curious to see what he'll do with this, because if he does want to run for president, I think he would know that this particular ban is just so excessively extreme that it would be a losing issue, and he would lose a lot of votes, especially from us who are knowledgeable about these things and are making it our mission to educate. So we're going to keep our eye on AB 1127. We're excited to see how it transpires here. If he doesn't sign it, that would be a real pivot from his normal MO. So we'll keep you updated on this, and we'll see you at the range.